Picture a beautiful house on one of the finest streets in London. Brass knocker, gleaming windows, the kind of door that makes people slow down just to look. Now go around the back, down the area steps, below street level, through the door with no knocker, because nobody important uses this door. Add a coal cellar, a boot room, a kitchen that hasn't cooled since Tuesday. Add 12 pairs of shoes that need a mirror shine by 6 a.m., 40 pounds of coal that need to be upstairs before the family opens their eyes, and hands so black with lamp black they look like they belong to someone else. Those hands are yours. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the Georgian Golden Age. The architecture, the portraits, the candlelit dinner parties. None of it runs itself. It runs on people who wake at 4:30, who are everywhere in a house and somehow nowhere in it, who hear every argument, read every mood, know every secret, and are legally required to pretend they don't. You're a ghost in this house, present in every room, visible to no one. We're going back there tonight, not as admirers of the Georgian facade, as the person who polishes it. I make these history stories, and I genuinely don't know if anyone sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying there feeling grateful for the existence of central heating. Either way, get comfortable. Here we go. Your name is Thomas Whitfield. You're 17 years old, and you arrived in London 11 months ago from a village called Chedworth in Gloucestershire, with a letter of recommendation from the Reverend Mr. Ashby. 2 shirts, a pair of breeches that were slightly too large, and absolutely no idea what you were walking into. Back home, everyone said London would make you. They didn't say it might also break you first. You're a junior footman in the household of Sir Edmund Cavendish Moore, Baronet of number 14, Berkeley Square, Mayfair. The house is 4 stories above ground, 1 below. It employs 11 indoor servants. You're near the bottom of that 11, not quite the bottom. That distinction belongs to Nell, the scullery maid, who is 13, and who you've never seen sit down during daylight hours. But you're close enough. The boot room is cold in a way that seems personal, like the cold has specifically targeted you. It comes up through the stone flags and into your knees. It radiates off the brick walls. It settles on your neck where your collar doesn't quite reach. It is, according to the clock on the kitchen mantelpiece, 6:43 in the morning. You've been at those boots since 5:15. The method for Georgian boot blacking, since I suspect you don't know it and it's genuinely interesting in a horrible way. You start with a mixture of lamp black and lard applied with a cloth, working it into the leather in circles, pressing hard enough to open the grain of the leather so the colour can penetrate. Then you wait. Then you apply a second coat, thinner, and begin to work it with the polishing brush. Long strokes, short strokes, the brush moving faster and faster until friction builds heat and the wax begins to shine. Then a final pass with a clean cloth, soft, slow, drawing out the gloss. The result, if you do it right, is a shine so deep and dark it looks like black water. The result, if you do it wrong, is that Mr. Hartley says nothing, looks at the boots for 3 long seconds, and sets them back in front of you. Mr. Hartley is the butler. He's been in service for 22 years. He was butler at 2 houses before this one, both of them grander than Berkeley Square. He knows things about the correct way to do everything that would fill several books, the correct way to fold a napkin, the correct way to present a wine bottle, the correct temperature at which various wines should be served, which in 1763 involves no thermometers and requires judgment built from years of experience. He's taught you about a quarter of what he knows. and already your head swims with rules and protocols and the precise social geography of who gets served first at a table and why. "You're slow," he said, watching you at the boots this morning. Not unkindly, not cruelly, just as a statement of fact. You didn't argue. He's right. James, the senior footman, can black a pair of Hessians in 40 minutes. You need an hour and a half. Your hands lack the memory for it, the automatic competence that comes from 10,000 repetitions. You have, by your calculation, completed roughly 420 repetitions so far, 9,580 to go. The smell of the boot room is its own world. Lamp black and tallow, obviously. That rich, slightly rancid fat smell cut through with the sharp mineral bite of the black. Your hands carry it now all day, every day, no matter how hard you scrub at them. It lives in the grooves of your knuckles, in the lines of your palms, but underneath that there's the smell of leather. Good leather, bad leather, leather that's been repaired and resoled and repaired again. Sir Edmund's dress boots are Italian, and they smell of something faintly exotic, like cedar and dried herbs, even buried under the lamp black. Lady Cavendish More's riding boots. She's one of those ladies who actually rides, not just sits prettily in a carriage. Smell of horse and damp, and the particular outdoor smell of rotten row on a spring morning. And underneath everything, the base smell of the house itself. Coal smoke and cooking grease and the damp that gets into old stone no matter what you do. Every house has its own smell. You learned that quickly. This house smells of prosperity and effort in equal measure. You put the last pair of boots on the rack, 12 pairs, done. Now the coal. And when I say coal, I need you to understand what that means in a Georgian townhouse. This isn't modern central heating, where somewhere in a basement a boiler does all the work and warmth just comes out of radiators. This is individual fires in every room, every morning. The drawing room, the dining room, the library, the morning room, Sir Edmund's study, Lady Cavendish More's boudoir, the master bedroom, the guest bedrooms when occupied. That's 8 fires minimum. More if there are guests. Each fire burns roughly 40 pounds of coal in a day. 40 pounds. Each scuttle holds about 20 pounds when full. You do the math. The coal cellar is below the boot room, down another half flight of steps through a door that you swear gets lower every time you walk through it. You have to duck or you'll take the top of your skull off on the lintel. You learned that on day 3, the hard way. The smell down there is different again. Pure coal. That dark, ancient smell. Compressed time, really. Millions of years of compressed swamp and forest reduced to something you can burn. It settles on the back of your throat. Gets into your hair. You fill the first scuttle, watching the black chunks tumble in, hearing the hollow metallic sound they make against the iron sides. Then you pick it up. 20 pounds of coal in an iron scuttle, plus the weight of the scuttle itself, which is maybe another 6 or 7 pounds. 27 pounds. Call it 30. Now climb 4 flights of stairs. Don't spill it. Don't leave coal dust on the carpet. Try not to breathe too hard because you're wearing your working clothes, but you'll need to change into livery before the family comes downstairs, and there's no time to get coal dust on the livery. Don't make any noise, because Sir Edmund is a light sleeper, and Lady Cavendish More has migraines, and do this approximately 12 times before breakfast. This is the physical reality of domestic service in 1763 that nobody talks about when they talk about the elegance of the Georgian era. They talk about the architecture, the furniture, the paintings, The silver. They don't talk about the person who carried that silver up from the plate room, polished it until their arms ached, laid it precisely on the table according to rules that would make a military general weep, and then stood against the wall for 3 hours while the family ate and talked and occasionally asked for the gravy. They don't talk about that person at all. That person was invisible. You are learning to be invisible. It's harder than it sounds. The first fire is the drawing room. You climb the back stairs, the servants' stairs, narrow and uncarpeted, tucked behind the walls like a secret, and emerge into the ground floor corridor through a door that, when closed, looks like part of the panelling. This is deliberate. The house was designed so that servants could move through it without being seen. The back stairs run parallel to the main staircase. The doors are hidden. The whole infrastructure of service is invisible, woven into the walls. You are literally in the architecture. The drawing room is cold and still. The curtains are still drawn. The ashes from yesterday's fire sit grey and dead in the grate. You work quickly. Rake the ashes to the side. Lay the new paper. Stack the kindling in the right pattern. You learn the pattern from James. Pyramid, not flat. You need air to move through it. Add the coal. Check the flue is open. Strike the steel and flint. The spark catches. The kindling takes. You watch it for a moment, because you've learned that you never fully trust a new fire until it's established. The smell of smoke and wood smoke. The crackle of the kindling finding its confidence. The first tentative lick of orange against the paper. There it is. You close the screen, pick up the empty scuttle, and back out into the corridor the way you came. 7 more fires to go. The clock downstairs said 6:51 when you left. The family won't come downstairs until 9 at the earliest. But Mr. Hartley expects every fire lit, every room dusted and swept, every curtain drawn back, every table set and ready by 8:30. You move faster. James is already in the dining room when you get there. He's laying the cloth. Long white linen, pressed to razor precision, unfolding across the mahogany table in a single smooth movement that leaves not a wrinkle. James is 22 and has been in service since he was 15. He has the look of someone who's been polished along with the silver. Smooth, controlled, every movement deliberate. He's from Somerset originally, but you'd never know it from his speech. He scrubbed the West Country out of his voice and replaced it with something neutral and careful. The voice of a good footman. Present, but not assertive. Clear, but not obtrusive. Fires? He asks without looking up from the cloth. Drawing room done, heading to the morning room next. Do the library first. Sir Edmund came down at 6. Your stomach drops slightly. Sir Edmund came down at 6? He didn't ring, you say. He never rings when he comes down. Early. He just appears. James smooths a barely visible crease from the cloth with his thumb. He was in the library. Mr. Hartley saw him. Was he angry that the fire wasn't lit? A pause. Mr. Hartley had it done by the time he arrived. James finally looks up. His expression is not unkind, but it is precise. So, library first, and Thomas. You wait. Sir Edmund does not like to hear the coal scuttle on the stairs. Carry it with your left hand and hold it against your thigh as you climb. It muffles the sound. You nod. File this away, alongside the 400 other rules you filed away in 11 months. Against your thigh, muffles the sound. You go. I want to stop here for a moment and tell you something about the world you've walked into. Because the mechanics of the coal and the boots and the fires, those are interesting and terrible in their own right. But the real structure of this life is something else. something more subtle and in some ways more astonishing. The hierarchy of a Georgian great house is a complete social system unto itself. And I mean complete. It has its own ranks, its own economy, its own laws, its own customs. At the top, the butler and the housekeeper. In a house like this, they rank above every other servant and answer only to the family. The butler controls the male staff and the wine and the plate. The housekeeper controls the female staff and the linen and the stores. They don't really answer to each other. They coexist, sometimes uneasily. Below them, the cook who runs the kitchen like a general runs a campaign, and whose authority in that domain is absolute. Then the upper servants, the lady's maid, who attends personally to Lady Cavendish Moore, and who knows things about that lady that no one else in the world knows, and who guards this knowledge like a state secret. The valet, who does the same for Sir Edmund. These positions carry prestige. Then the footmen, James, Senior, and you, Junior. The footmen are the public face of the household. You carry things, open doors, serve at table, accompany the family when they go out. You are, in the eyes of the world, the visible servants. You are chosen partly for competence and partly for appearance. Yes, appearance. Footmen in great houses were expected to be tall, well-proportioned, presentable, because you were, in essence, part of the decor. A handsome footman in full livery, standing at attention in a candlelit dining room, was a statement of wealth and taste. There is a whole industry of footmen wearing wigs and face powder to make them look more uniform, more impressive, more decorative. The hair powder tax passed in 1795 will eventually kill this practice. But right now, in 1763, you wear powder on formal occasions. You wear livery, Sir Edmund's colours, dark blue and gold, with brass buttons stamped with the Cavendish Moor crest. Knee breeches, white stockings, buckled shoes. It takes 20 minutes to get into full livery properly. 15 of those minutes are the stockings. The stockings have to be pulled smooth without a single wrinkle, or they bunch under the knee breeches and drive you slowly insane for the rest of the day. You have managed this perhaps 7 times in 11 months. Below the footmen, the housemaids who clean every room in the house every day, and who are, by general consensus, the hardest workers in a household full of hard workers, and at the bottom, the scullery maid, Nell, who is 13, and who has the reddest, roughest hands you've ever seen on a human being, who washes every dish and pot and pan and knife and fork and serving platter in the house, by hand, in water that is sometimes cold and sometimes scalding, and never quite the right temperature for her cracked raw skin. Nell, who arrived 3 months ago from Kent, and who still sometimes cries quietly at the sink when she thinks no one can hear. She doesn't know that the sounds carry up through the kitchen ceiling to the servants' hall where everyone pretends not to notice. The library fire is lit by the time you get there. Of course it is. Mr. Hartley, who has been awake since 5 and who does not appear to require sleep in the conventional sense, has already handled it. The library is warm and smells of old books and the specific type of coal dust that settles on paper over decades. The bookshelves rise to the ceiling 12 feet at least, lined with volumes in leather and cloth binding. A library ladder on brass rails that you've been explicitly warned not to use for anything other than reaching books. The ladder looks like tremendous fun. You've not used it for anything other than reaching books. On Sir Edmund's desk, papers are scattered in the ordered chaos of someone who works in the early hours before the household wakes. Correspondence, ledgers, what looks like a draft of a letter, half written, ink not yet dry. You do not read it. This is one of the absolute laws of service. You see everything and you remember nothing. You're in rooms where important papers lie open, where conversations happen as though you weren't there, where the whole private machinery of an aristocratic life runs in front of you, and you see and hear and know none of it. You lay a second coal on the fire, adjust the screen, and leave the room exactly as you found it, except that it is now warmer. Downstairs, by 7:30, the servants' hall has come to life. The servants' hall is a room in the basement between the kitchen and the wine cellar that serves as the communal space for the indoor staff. Long table, 2 benches, a fireplace that's perpetually either roaring too hot or barely smouldering, a clock on the wall that everyone checks constantly and none of them trust. Mrs. Drummond, the housekeeper, sits at the head of the table. She's 53, compact, angular, with grey hair pulled back so severely that it seems to pull her features slightly forward. She has been housekeeper at this house for 11 years and at 3 houses before it. She has overseen the hiring and firing of more servants than she can remember, and the running of households through deaths and births and bankruptcies and scandals. She does not miss much. She is pouring her tea when you come in. The tea is a social marker. Mrs. Drummond and Mr. Hartley drink tea from the same china that the family uses, kept in the housekeeper's room under lock and key because tea is expensive and because status must be maintained even, especially below stairs. The footmen, the housemaids, the cook's assistant, and the scullery maid drink from earthenware mugs. It is, by the standards of the servants' hall, a significant distinction. You sit at your place on the bench. James slides a mug of small beer toward you without looking up from the bread he's cutting. Small beer for breakfast. It sounds alarming to modern ears, but this is actually sensible. The water in 1763 London is not reliably clean, and small beer, very low alcohol, watered down, essentially bread-flavoured water, is safer. Children drink it. Pregnant women drink it. Everyone drinks it. The bread is yesterday's, harder than it was this morning, but there's butter, and the butter is good. The cook, Mrs. Parry, is from a dairy family in Wiltshire and takes the butter seriously. She takes almost everything seriously. Fires? Mrs. Drummond asks without looking up from her correspondence. All done except the guest rooms, you say. Sir Edmund's study wasn't needed. I checked with Mr. Hartley. I know what Mr. Hartley said. She turns a page. Agnes will need the boudoir fire up by 8:30. Lady Cavendish Moore breakfasts early today. Agnes is the lady's maid. She nods fractionally. She's 27, quiet, and has a way of moving through a room that makes you think of smoke. She's just there, and then she isn't. Thomas. Mrs. Drummond looks up. Her eyes are sharp and grey and entirely undeceived. You have coal dust on your collar. Yes, Mrs. Drummond. You have a quarter hour before livery. Use it. Yes, Mrs. Drummond. And James will show you again the proper way to carry the scuttle on the stairs. I could hear you on the 2nd floor. Yes, Mrs. Drummond, she returns to her correspondence. You eat your bread and drink your small beer and think about the 7 flights of stairs you have climbed this morning, carrying 30 pounds of coal and the 7 more you will climb before noon. The livery. There is a closet off the servants' hall specifically for changing, which is used in relays during the morning as the male staff transition from working clothes to formal wear. Your livery is dark blue, as I mentioned. Coat with brass buttons, knee breeches, white linen shirt with ruffled cuffs, white stockings. The stockings. The problem with white stockings is that they show everything, every wrinkle, every smudge, every slight asymmetry in the way they sit on your calf. You pull the left one up slowly, smoothing with your palm as you go. Flat. Smooth. No bunching at the ankle. The right one has a slight twist in the fabric that you've been fighting since the day it was assigned to you. You tug at the toe. Smooth from ankle to knee. Better. The knee buckles of the breeches fasten just below the knee, and the top of the stocking folds over to just below that. When this goes right, the transition is seamless. One smooth line of white from shoe to knee. It almost goes right to day. You examine yourself in the small mirror nailed to the wall. A tall boy. That's why you were hired, the height. With a narrow face and hands that are permanently slightly grey no matter how hard you scrub. Hair powdered this morning. Queue tied neatly at the back of your neck. You look, you think, like a footman, which is the point. James appears in the doorway. He examines you. He adjusts your left cuff, straightens your queue by approximately 2 degrees. Your left stocking, he says. You look down. Outside of the ankle, he says. Slight buckle. You can fix it without removing the shoe. You reach down and work the fabric with 2 fingers, pulling gently from the heel. The buckle resolves. Good morning, James says, meaning you're ready. Meaning the working day, the visible working day has begun. Good morning, you say back. The bell system. This is the thing that shapes your entire existence in a Georgian house. The bells. They're installed in a long row in the passage outside the kitchen. Each bell is labelled with the room it corresponds to. Drawing room, dining room, library, master bedroom, ladies' boudoir, morning room, and so on. When a member of the family pulls the bell pull in their room, a cord connected via a system of wires and pulleys running inside the walls. The corresponding bell rings downstairs, and someone comes. You spend a significant portion of every day waiting for bells to ring, standing in the corridor, sitting in the servants' hall, moving through the house quietly ready. The bell rings. You move. The art of it, and it is an art, is appearing in the doorway within 60 seconds of the bell ringing without having appeared to rush. No panting, no visible effort. You simply materialize, composed and attentive. How do you do it? You ask James in your second week, genuinely baffled. He looked at you for a moment. You move faster than you look like you're moving. Like a duck, he said. That is, you learned. Actually, the correct mental model. Calm on the surface. Controlled effort underneath. You have gotten better at it. You are still not as good as James. The morning moves through its gears. Sir Edmund comes downstairs at 9:15. He is 44, broad-shouldered, still carrying the build of the cavalry officer he was in his 20s. He has a presence that fills rooms. He takes his breakfast in the dining room. You serve it. Kippers, toast, 2 soft-boiled eggs, coffee. The coffee is new. Coffee was a novelty in the previous century, something for coffee houses, something exotic. Now it's something that certain fashionable households serve at breakfast, alongside or instead of chocolate. Sir Edmund takes his coffee black. This tells you nothing about him as a person, but it tells you that he prefers simplicity to fuss, which is consistent with everything else you know about him. You pour. You withdraw to your position against the wall near the window. You stand. There is no other word for it. You stand. Sir Edmund reads his correspondence. He makes occasional notes in a small leather book. He eats efficiently. He is not a man who takes pleasure in breakfast as a sensory experience, its fuel and information consumed simultaneously. On the sideboard are the morning newspapers, the Public Advertiser, the London Chronicle. James will have laid them out in the correct order. most important first. He's usually right about which is most important, developed from years of observing which one Sir Edmund reaches for first. After 22 minutes, Sir Edmund finishes his coffee and puts down his spoon and looks at you directly for the first time all morning. Whitfield. Sir? Tell Hartley I want the carriage at 11. I'm going to my club. Yes, sir. And... He pauses, looking back at his letters. Has the post brought anything from Gloucester? A package, possibly. I'll check with Mr. Hartley, sir. He nods. Returns to his letters. You're dismissed, more or less. You take the empty coffee cup on the silver tray and walk to the door. Whitfield, you stop. Close the curtain on the east window. There's a draught. Yes, sir. You close the curtain, adjust the overlap. The draught disappears. Sir Edmund says nothing. He has already returned to his letters. That is the whole transaction. You were present. You were useful. You were not noticed. That is a successful morning. Let me tell you something about Georgian London that you probably know in theory and don't fully feel yet. This city in 1763 is the largest city in the Western world. Paris is comparable. Amsterdam was once. But right now, London, with somewhere between 700,000 and 750,000 people crammed into its square miles, is the biggest place on the planet that isn't Chinese. And Berkeley Square, where you live and work, is in the heart of the grandest, newest, most aggressively fashionable part of it. Mayfair. The name comes from the Mayfair that was held here before the Great Development swallowed the fields. That fair was banned in 1764, partly because it was rowdy, and partly because the noise disturbed the new residents who'd built their grand houses around it. The new residents won, obviously. They always do. The square itself was laid out in the 1730s and 40s. The plane trees in the central garden are still young enough to have gaps in their canopy. In 50 years, they'll create the famous green shade the square is known for. Right now, they're still growing into their reputation. The houses are built of pale brick, clean-lined, nothing excessive. Georgian architecture is about proportion rather than decoration. The windows descend in height as you go up the building, tall on the ground floor, shorter on each successive story, and this creates an optical illusion that makes the whole facade seem to lean slightly forward, like a person paying polite attention. This is, in fact, exactly what it's doing. These houses are performing wealth, tasteful, controlled wealth, not screaming it, not showing off, just indicating it. With perfect proportions and correct details and that brass knocker you can see your face in. At 11 o'clock, Mr. Hartley sends you on an errand. Not the carriage. That's the coachman's domain, and the stables are around the mews at the back, but an errand on foot. A package to be collected from a linen draper on Bond Street, selected and paid for yesterday by Lady Cavendish Moore. Bond Street is about 10 minutes on foot. 6 if you walk with purpose. You walk with purpose. The air outside hits you after the controlled atmosphere of the house. Coal smoke and horse dung and something faintly sweet from the baker's 2 streets over. The smell of London. Your smell now. You've absorbed it so completely over 11 months that you barely notice it anymore. The streets of Mayfair are a different world from the London you've read about in pamphlets and heard about in tavern conversations. Mayfair is clean, relatively. The streets are paved and maintained. There are actual flagstone pavements on the main streets, raised slightly above the road so that foot traffic is separated from horse traffic. This is a luxury. On most of London's streets, you take your chances. The people on Bond Street move differently from the people in, say, Southwark or Whitechapel. Their clothes are different. Their pace is different. There's a kind of studied leisure to the way they walk, the way they stop and examine shop windows, the way they acknowledge each other. You've learned to navigate this world in your livery without being invisible in the wrong way. In Mayfair, a footman in his household's colours is a recognisable figure, a known quantity. You're not a threatening presence. You're not a suspicious one. You're part of the scenery. Bond Street in 1763 is already on its way to becoming the shopping street it remains today. Drapers and milliners and hatters and booksellers and dealers in luxury goods. The kind of shops where the prices aren't displayed, because if you need to ask the price, you can't afford to be here. The linen drapers is called Bickerton and Sons. It's been here since 1741, according to the date above the door, which I mention because I find it oddly reassuring that some things persist. Inside it smells of cloth and sizing and the particular dry sweetness of new linen. Bolts of fabric are stacked on shelves to the ceiling, arranged by colour and weight and type in a taxonomy that must have taken years to perfect. A man behind the counter looks at your livery and immediately understands the transaction. He disappears into the back and returns with a wrapped package, brown paper and string, Lady Cavendish More's name written on the outside in a careful hand. "For her ladyship," he says, "already settled. Thank you." And that's it. 20 seconds. You tuck the package under your arm and walk back out onto Bond Street. The errand took 11 minutes, including walking time. You could go back to Berkeley Square directly. You take a slight detour instead. Not because you're lazy. Not because you're avoiding anything. Because there's something you've been wanting to see properly since your first week in London, and every time you pass near it, something pulls you a step or two closer. The something is Burlington House. It's on Piccadilly, a short walk south. Not far out of your way if you walk fast, which you intend to. Now, Burlington House in 1763 is not quite the building it will eventually become. It hasn't yet been absorbed by the Royal Academy of Arts. That won't happen until 1768, just 5 years from now, and it's still in private hands, still being used as a private house by various aristocratic tenants. But it stands back from Piccadilly behind a screen of low buildings and a forecourt, and what you can see of it from the street is extraordinary. Colonnaded, porticoed, stone that's been weathered to a warm cream colour. The kind of building that says, someone who understood architecture built this, and they built it to last. The arcade of the forecourt stretches on either side of the central entrance, its arches rhythmically perfect, each one framing a view of the courtyard behind. You stand on the pavement opposite for about 90 seconds. You're not supposed to gawk. You're a footman on an errand. Gawking is not part of the job description. But you gawk. Something about great architecture does this to you. It has done it since your first week, when you turned a corner on your first solo errand and found yourself face to face with the dome of St. Paul's at the end of Ludgate Hill, and stopped walking completely. These buildings were made by people, actual human beings, with hands and tools and plans on paper. They stood where you're standing and imagined this into existence. The men who laid these stones are dead now, most of them, but the stones remain, slightly warmed by the spring morning, slightly rough under your fingertips if you touch them, which you don't, because that would be extremely irregular. You don't touch the stones, you put the package more firmly under your arm and start walking. You have maybe 5 minutes before you're expected back. Back at Berkeley Square, the morning has moved into its middle phase. Lady Cavendish More has come downstairs. She's in the morning room with Agnes in attendance, writing letters. Lady Cavendish More writes approximately 8 letters a day. This seems like a lot until you understand that letters are how her social world is maintained. Invitations accepted and declined, arrangements made and confirmed, news passed on, gossip sometimes, though she would never use that word. She is 41 years old and has the posture of a woman who was told from childhood to keep her shoulders back. She is not beautiful in the conventional Georgian sense, not round-faced and pink-cheeked, but she has something better than beauty in the long run. She has style, which is self-possession made visible. She doesn't look at you when you bring the parcel from Bickerton's. This is normal. Ladies don't look directly at footmen in the course of their domestic duties. This isn't rudeness exactly. It's convention. A way of maintaining the fiction that the house runs itself, that the fires light themselves and the tables set themselves and packages arrive from Bond Street by some benign domestic magic. You set the package on the table beside Agnes. Agnes looks at you. Just a flicker of acknowledgement. A nod so small it could be a muscle movement. You withdraw. There is a moment, sometime round noon, when the house has a brief stillness. Sir Edmund has left for his club. Lady Cavendish Moore is still in the morning room. The housemaids have completed the bedroom floors and retreated. The kitchen is in the quiet phase between breakfast clearing and luncheon preparation. You find yourself in the corridor outside the library, waiting, not quite doing anything. The bells are silent. The library door is ajar. Through it, you can see the shelves, the books, the desk with Sir Edmund's morning's work still on it, papers stacked now by Mr. Hartley, or perhaps by Sir Edmund himself before he left. You've been in this room 100 times, to light the fire, to bring correspondence, to straighten and dust and withdraw. You've read the spines of approximately 240 of those books. In Chedworth, the Reverend Mr. Ashby had a library of about 30 volumes. You read all of them, some of them twice. He was the one who wrote the letter of recommendation that got you this position. Thomas, he said the day before you left for London, you have a mind that needs more than Chedworth can give it. Go and use it. You think about that sometimes, in the quiet noon moments, in the back stairs late at night. You have a mind. You're currently using it to carry coal and polish boots and stand against walls at dinner. This is not a complaint. This is just a fact. You are 17 and you're at the beginning of something, and you don't yet know what that something is. Luncheon is served at 1 o'clock. Lady Cavendish Moore takes it in the morning room. Simple. Cold meats, bread, a small decanter of wine. You bring it up. James serves. Then you're released for your own meal downstairs, which is the most important social event of the servants' day. Dinner, they call it. The formal meal at the servants' table, even though it's at noon. In working households, the main meal has always been midday. The rich have pushed their main meal later and later. It's now at 5 or 6 in the evening for fashionable families. But in the servants' hall, dinner is at noon, and that's that. Mrs. Parry has made a mutton stew. I want to stop for a moment and talk about Mrs. Parry. Because she is, in many ways, the most powerful person in this building, not officially. Officially she outranks you, but doesn't approach Mr. Hartley or Mrs. Drummond. But in the practical reality of daily life, the cook controls more than almost anyone else. She controls food. And in 1763, when most working people eat the same 5 or 6 things in rotation every week, the quality of your food is not a small matter. It is a daily fact of life that shapes your mood, your health, your energy, your sense of whether this job's bearable. A good cook in a good household is a significant reason to stay in that household rather than seeking another position. Mrs. Parry is a good cook. This stew is rich, dark, smelling of onions and herbs, and the particular depth that comes from meat that's been slowly coaxed rather than harshly boiled. She makes a bread to go with it, round, slightly rough, with a crust that cracks satisfyingly when you tear it. You eat it and feel it do what food is supposed to do. Fill something. Restore something. Nell, the scullery maid, is eating standing up near the sink, because there isn't enough room at the table when the full staff is assembled. Nobody has suggested moving to give her a seat. You think about this for a moment. Then you move to the end of the bench, creating an extra 6 inches of space. Nell, here. She looks at you. Suspicious. The way people who have been treated badly long enough become suspicious of small kindnesses because small kindnesses often turn out to be something else. "I'm nearly done," she says. "Sit down," Mrs. Drummond says, without looking up from her own bowl. "Stop looming, child. It gives me a headache." Nell sits. After dinner, which is to say afternoon, the afternoon shifts into its next phase. For you, this means the silver. The Cavendish Moor silver is substantial. A full dinner service for 24, plates, bowls, serving dishes, tureens, sauce boats, candlesticks, condiment sets, a centrepiece, the epergne, that is a cascade of silver branches and baskets designed to hold fruit and flowers in the middle of a formal dining table. There's also the everyday silver, cruets, toast racks, coffee pots, teapots, butter dishes. All of it needs to be polished weekly. Some of it needs daily attention. The polishing is done with a paste made from rotten stone, a fine abrasive powder, and water, applied with a soft cloth. You work in small circles. The smell is chalk and metal, and the faint minerality of the rotten stone itself. Your hands are dry from it immediately. The skin on your knuckles tightens. The trick with silver is pressure. Too much, and you create tiny scratches that catch the light wrong. Too little, and the tarnish stays under the surface, a grey ghost visible only in certain lights. You've been doing this for 11 months. Your hands have learned the pressure now, more or less, the automatic calibration. You work through the dessert spoons first. 12 of them. Each one turned in the light after polishing, checked at every angle. The maker's mark on these spoons is Hester Bateman, a woman silversmith, which was unusual. She ran her late husband's workshop and made it into something extraordinary. These spoons were made in the 1750s, less than a decade ago. You know this because James told you, the same way he told you a dozen other things about the objects you tend. He has a way of slipping information into instructions that makes it stick. You remember the history because it came attached to the correct technique. It's, you realise, a kind of teaching. Maybe the only kind of teaching available to a boy in your position. At 3:30, the bells erupt. Not one bell, 3 in quick succession. Drawing room, library, master bedroom. James appears from somewhere. You'll never quite understand where James materialises from, and glances at the bells. Library is Sir Edmund. He's back from his club. He moves toward the stairs. Drawing room will be callers. Take that one. You take the drawing room bell. 2 ladies are waiting in the hall, their maid standing at a respectful distance behind them. You've seen both of them before. Mrs. Fellows, who calls on Lady Cavendish Moor regularly, and her daughter, who's perhaps 19, and who has the particular quality of not quite being present that some very pretty, very sheltered young women develop, as if they're always slightly waiting for something to happen. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Fellows, Miss Fellows." Lady Cavendish More. Mrs. Fellows hands you her card. This is the ritual. You know perfectly well she wants Lady Cavendish More, who is her friend of 15 years. But the card must be presented. I'll let her ladyship know you're here. May I take your things? Cloaks, a hat, gloves. You receive them. Show them to the drawing room. Stoke the fire. It's been 2 hours since you lit it, and it's settled into embers. Bring it back. Lady Cavendish More will be down directly. You retreat to the hall and send Agnes to alert her mistress. Then you stand in the hall, waiting. This is perhaps half your day, the waiting. You don't mind it the way you thought you would. In Chedworth, waiting was frustrating, because in Chedworth nothing was happening, and nothing would happen. Here, even waiting has texture. You stand in the hall, and the house lives around you. Footsteps on the floors above, the distant sound of Mrs. Parry in the kitchen beginning the preparations for dinner, the muffled rise and fall of conversation from the drawing room as Lady Cavendish More arrives and the calling ritual begins. Through the window, the square with its young plane trees and passing carriages. London doing what London does, which is to say, everything continuously without pause. At 5 o'clock, James finds you in the silver room and looks at you with a particular expression. James has many expressions. Most of them are versions of neutral. But this one has something in it that you've learned means brace yourself. Lady Cavendish More has asked for the gold service tonight. You blink. The what? There are 6 people for dinner. It's a notable occasion, apparently. Sir Edmund's business partner has returned from India. James leans against the doorframe. The gold service is in the vault beneath Mr. Hartley's room. We'll need both of us to carry it up and lay it properly. I didn't know there was a gold service. There are things in this house that most of the staff have never seen. He pushes himself off the doorframe. Tonight you'll see them, and you'll handle them carefully. The vault beneath Mr. Hartley's room contains, it turns out, the full formal service that is brought out only for significant dinners, gold-plated plate. Not solid gold, gilded silver, but the effect is extraordinary. And crystal that catches the candlelight in ways that make the whole table seem to burn. You carry the pieces up reverently, wrapped in their individual chamois cloths. They are warm under your hands, heavier than they look. When you unwrap the first piece, a serving dish about the size of a large hat box, its surface worked with a vine pattern that flows continuously around the rim. You hold it in both hands and feel the weight of it, the warmth of the gold against your palms. The men who made this are probably dead. The man who commissioned it might be dead. Some lord or Sir Edmund's, grandfather perhaps, at some other house in some other decade. But here it is, persistent, warm, real. Thomas, James says, not unkindly. We don't stand and stare at the plate. Right. Laying the table for a formal dinner in a Georgian household is an architectural project. You start with the cloth. Double linen damask, so heavy it takes 2 people to handle it without it touching the floor. It goes on in a single pull, smoothed from the centre outward, achieving that absolute white plane that is the foundation of everything else. Then the epergne, placed at the centre. It's taller than your head by a few inches, its silver branches arranged so that from any seat at the table, you're looking through it rather than over or under it. Then the settings themselves. 12 inches from the table's edge to the nearest piece of cutlery. All pieces in perfect alignment with the setting opposite, so that if you look down the length of the table, the rows of silver are straight as soldiers, the candelabras, 4 of them, each holding 5 candles placed at precise intervals. Not lit yet. They'll be lit by James immediately before the guests sit down, but positioned, their crystal pendants caught by the early evening light from the windows. The glassware. Wine glasses for the table wine, smaller glasses for dessert wine, water glasses that nobody will use because drinking water at dinner in 1763 is still considered slightly odd. When it's done, you and James stand back and look at it. Good, James says. That's it. Just good. But James saying good is what Mr. Hartley saying extraordinary would mean from anyone else. You feel the particular satisfaction of a physical thing done correctly. The satisfaction of a table that looks genuinely like an object of beauty, which it is. 8 people will sit at this table tonight and eat and talk and drink and never once think about the 2 people who created this out of wood and linen and metal. That is the job. That is, in its strange way, the craft, making the invisible visible for the people at the table, while making yourself invisible in the process. The dinner guests begin arriving at 6. You're positioned in the hall for this. James at the door, you at the foot of the staircase, ready to direct guests upstairs to the drawing room where the family receives before dinner. The guests are 6. Sir Edmund's business partner, a Mr. Alderton, returned after 2 years in Calcutta managing the firm's trading interests there. He is deeply tanned in a way that makes Londoners stare slightly, dressed in good clothes that are cut by English hands, but worn in a way that suggests he's not entirely comfortable back in them. With him, his wife, who has not been to India, and who looks relieved to be in a drawing room again. A member of Parliament whose name you know from the newspapers, but whose face means nothing to you until James murmurs it as the carriage arrives. Mr. Carver from Bristol, old, friend of Sir Edmund's. A lawyer and his wife, and one more, a man who arrives last on foot without a carriage, which is unusual for Berkeley Square dinner guests. About 30, simply dressed, pleasant-faced, carrying a leather case. He hands James his card and waits. James brings it to Mr. Hartley. Mr. Hartley looks at it with an expression you can't read. Then he nods. Mr. Reynolds, he says, show him up. The name means nothing to you at this moment. It will mean something later. Full livery for a formal dinner is different from the daytime working livery. Hair freshly powdered. You've redone yours in the hour before guests arrived, standing in the changing room with James. Both of you work in a fine white powder into your cues, which is achieved by covering your face with a cone of paper, while someone applies the powder with a bellows, and then you stand very still while the powder settles. You look like something between a footman and a cloud. The effect in a candlelit dining room is actually quite striking. The knee breeches pressed, the brass buttons polished one more time, the white stockings. You managed both legs this time, no buckle on either, a small victory that nonetheless feels significant. Ready? James asks. Ready. Remember, you serve from the left. You remove from the right. You watch Sir Edmund's glass. He drinks claret and it should never be below half. Do not refill until you see the bottom of the glass. If Mr. Hartley pours wine from the carafe, stand back. If he nods at you, bring the Madeira from the sideboard. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact with female guests. If a guest addresses you directly, answer in as few words as possible, and then become furniture again. Become furniture. Become furniture. They're called to dinner at 7. 8 people process down the stairs from the drawing room in the correct order of precedence and take their seats. Mr. Hartley seats them with the sleight of hand authority of someone who has been doing this his entire professional life. and in under 3 minutes they are arranged correctly around the table. The candles are lit. The first course arrives. You stand, you move, you become furniture. The first course is soup, a clear consommé, delicate, smelling of beef bone and bay leaf, followed by a remove of fish, a Dover sole that Mrs. Parry has roasted with herbs, the smell of it. When you lift the cover, briefly warming your face. The conversation is already going. These things move fast when the guests know each other. Mr. Alderton is talking about Calcutta, the Bengal heat, the particular challenge of running a trading house when the climate wants to destroy every document and every fabric sample you own. The humidity, he's saying, breaking a roll with his large brown hands. You think you know what wet means, and then you spend a summer in Calcutta. His wife, a small woman with a composed expression, says, "The spices. I dream about the spices, not in the way you'd think. I dream about the smell," Lady Cavendish Moore, serving her soup. Better than coal smoke and horse dung, one imagines. Gentle laughter. You refill Sir Edmund's claret. You carry the sole from the sideboard to the table. You lift and lower dishes with the specific precision required when the item is both hot and expensive. The lawyer's wife is to your left when you set down the fish. She glances sideways at you for a half-second, not really seeing you, more checking that nothing is about to go wrong, and then returns to the conversation. You're not there. You're furniture. The second course brings the main dishes. A roast of beef, a leg of lamb, 2 kinds of potatoes, a dish of greens, bread sauce, a green salad that is surprisingly dressed with vinegar and oil in a way that suggests Mrs. Parry has been studying French cookery books. And the conversation around the table has moved, as Georgian dinner, conversations often do, from pleasantries to something with more substance. The man who arrived on foot, Mr. Reynolds, is talking about painting. Not paintings as investment, not paintings as decoration for the correct walls. Painting as something else. The problem, he says, and he speaks with the confidence of a man who knows exactly what he thinks, is that we have no institution, no school. In France, there's the academy. In Rome, there are centuries of tradition, generations of masters. Here, a young man who wants to paint has nowhere to go to learn, no one to tell him whether his work has merit or folly. The MP, Mr. Carver, cuts his beef. Surely the Grand Tour provides some education. For those who can afford the Grand Tour, Mr. Reynolds accepts more wine. You pour it. I went to Rome for 2 years. It changed everything I understand about light. I came back and there was no institution, no support, no... The Society of Arts, Sir Edmund offers. The Society of Arts, Reynolds says, not dismissively, but with the precision of a man who has thought about this carefully, is not the same thing. Lady Cavendish Moore. What would the same thing look like, Mr. Reynolds? A pause. The kind of pause that means someone has been asked exactly the right question. A Royal Academy, he says, with a school, with standards, with exhibitions open to the public, where a young painter could learn the craft properly, be judged by his peers, and earn a living by his work without depending entirely on the patronage of individual families who may or may not understand what they're looking at. You set down the bread sauce boat. There will in fact be a Royal Academy of Arts in London. It will be founded in 1768. 5 years from now, its first president will be Joshua Reynolds. You are currently standing in the same room as the man who will make that happen. You are holding a bread sauce boat and watching it happen. That's that close, that real. I need to tell you about the man in the painting. Not here, not tonight. But over the next few weeks, something begins to happen. Mr. Reynolds comes to dinner 3 more times over the following month. He's working on a portrait of Sir Edmund. The sittings happen in the mornings in the library, which has good north light. You carry the painter's things up the stairs, a canvas in a wooden frame, brushes wrapped in linen, a wooden box of pigments that smells of linseed oil and something mineral and complicated. You bring him coffee at the appointed time. You replenish his water for brush cleaning. He talks while he works. Not to you, not exactly, but in the way that some people think out loud when they're doing something that requires physical concentration. The problem with official portraits, he says one morning, working with a smallish brush on the edge of Sir Edmund's coat where it catches the light, is that the sitter wants to look important, and they are important, but importance is not what makes a face interesting. What makes a face interesting is everything else. Sir Edmund is sitting perfectly still, his expression that particular controlled blankness of someone sitting for a portrait. "Go on," Sir Edmund says. It's the first time in 3 weeks of sittings that he's responded to the painter's monologue. Reynolds sets down the brush, picks up a slightly larger one. "In your case, it's this." He gestures at the left side of Sir Edmund's jaw with the dry brush. "Something you've carried for 20 years, I'd guess. That's what I want to paint." Sir Edmund says nothing. You pour coffee. You become furniture. But you think about that later. What you've carried for 20 years. You look at faces differently after that. The cook's face over the ranges at 6 in the morning. That particular tightness around her eyes that might be heat or might be something older. The housekeeper's face at the end of a long day just before she closes the door to her room. Your own face in the small mirror. The boy from Chedworth. Whoever is replacing him. 6 weeks into the events I'm describing. So, early May 1763, there is an incident. I want to be careful about how I tell thee one, because it's the kind of story that sounds petty from the outside and matters enormously from the inside, because it's about trust and about what a servant's life actually rests on. It starts with the spoon, not the gold service, an everyday spoon from the regular silver. One of the dessert spoons. It goes missing on a Tuesday. Mr. Hartley notices during the weekly silver count, which he conducts personally, every piece accounted for against the inventory ledger that's been kept since 1751. "We are short 1 dessert spoon," he says, and those 6 words fall on the servants' hall like a stone into still water. The rings spread outward. Mrs. Drummond is informed. Sir Edmund is not yet informed, because first there must be a search. The search is thorough. Every room, every drawer, the silver room stripped and counted, the kitchen turned over, the servants' bedrooms, and this is the part that feels like a violation, even though you knew it was possible, even though you have nothing to hide. The servants' bedrooms searched by Mr. Hartley himself, methodically. Your attic room. Your small chest with its 2 spare shirts, your letter from Reverend Ashby, the 6 shillings and 4pence you've saved over 11 months. Mr. Hartley opens your chest, looks through it, closes it again. He says nothing, but his face, which is usually entirely controlled, carries something in it when he closes that chest that might be either discomfort or calculation. The spoon is not found, and then, the next morning, something changes, not dramatically. The way things change in a house of servants often don't announce themselves, but you notice at breakfast that Nell does not sit down. She stands at the sink as usual, eating standing up though. There's a bench space today. She doesn't look at you, she doesn't look at anyone. And Mrs. Parry, who is usually precise about the way she moves in her kitchen, drops a ladle, picks it up quickly, doesn't swear, doesn't say anything, which is unusual. Mrs. Parry usually swears when she drops things. After breakfast, when you're in the silver room beginning the morning's polishing, James finds you. He closes the door. "The spoon," he says. "Yes." "Was broken. 2 weeks ago. Nell was cleaning it and bent the bowl, the way you do when you get the angle wrong. She panicked. She hid it." A pause. "Where?" you ask. "At the back of a kitchen shelf behind a jar of pickles. Mrs. Parry found it last night." "Mrs. Parry knew." A longer pause. "She knew this morning." You sit with this for a moment. So Mrs. Parry knew and didn't say anything when Mr. Hartley did the search. And there are 12 people in this house who spent a day under suspicion of theft because Nell is 13, James says. And if Mr. Hartley tells Sir Edmund that a silver spoon was broken by the scullery maid and then hidden, Nell gets dismissed without a character. And if Nell gets dismissed without a character from a Mayfair house at 13, she ends up... He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. You know what she ends up. You've walked through enough of London to know what a girl with no position and no character and no family within 100 miles ends up. What happens now, you ask? Mrs. Parry speaks to Mrs. Drummond. Mrs. Drummond speaks to Mr. Hartley. The spoon is presented as having been found in the back of a kitchen shelf, where it slipped behind something, a natural accident, easily done. And Mr. Hartley writes it into the ledger as accidental breakage and deducts half the replacement cost from the kitchen accounts. You're quiet for a moment. That's how it works, James says. Not defensively, just as a fact. Mr. Hartley has been in service for 22 years. He knows what happens to a 13-year-old without a character. He'll know it wasn't an accident in the back of the shelf. He'll know someone covered it up. And he'll let it happen. He'll let it happen because he was a boy in service himself once. And because... James stops, picks up a cloth, starts polishing without really looking at what he's polishing. You learn things in this work. You learn the rules. You also learn that the rules exist in relation to the people who are living by them, that some rules bend. He polishes the dish, doesn't look up. Some things, he says, you don't report. The spoon incident changes something, not dramatically, not in any way you could point to and say, there, that's the moment. But something shifts in the texture of the house, the way weather shifts before it rains, that quality of pressure in the air. Nell, for one thing. She doesn't know why the spoon matter closed the way it did. She knows only that it closed, that Mr. Hartley made a note in his ledger that no one was dismissed, that the house moved on. She probably thinks she got away with something through luck. She didn't get away with it. She was carried. That's different. You know this because James told you, and because you've been in service long enough now to read the currents of a household, the way a sailor reads water, the way something passes between Mrs. Drummond and Mrs. Parry at the breakfast table, the small nod. A week after the incident, you find yourself near the scullery around 2:30, returning a cleaned candlestick to the silver room, and you pass Nell at her sink. She's washing the luncheon dishes. Her hands are red and raw from wrist to fingertip, the skin cracked at the knuckles in the way that skin cracks when it's wet and dried and wet and dried, 100 times a day in water that's too cold or too hot and never exactly right. She's singing something under her breath, very quietly. Some song from Kent, probably. Something she knew before she knew London. She stops when she hears you. Don't stop, you say, because you're 17, and sometimes you say things without thinking them through. She looks at you, that suspicious look again, checking the angle. I wasn't singing, she says. All right, you say. You go past her into the silver room. Behind you, after a moment, the singing starts again. May becomes June. The London season is reaching its peak, which means the Cavendish Moor household is at its most demanding. The season, and when Georgians say the season, they mean the social season. The roughly 6 months between spring and early autumn, when fashionable London is in residence, and the rounds of dinners and assemblies and card parties and theatre visits and morning calls consume the waking hours of every aristocratic family in the city, means that the house runs at a different pace from the quiet months. More dinners, more guests, more bells ringing at inconvenient times. More work. You don't mind the work exactly. You mind the relentlessness of it, the way there's no moment in a day when you can stop entirely, when you can exist as a person rather than a function. Even your free time, 1/2 day per week, Sunday afternoons if the household doesn't need you, is shaped by the necessity of recovery. You sleep sometimes. You walk when you have the energy. You write letters home that take you a long time to compose because the things you want to say about London don't fit into the words available to you. Mother, the city is too large to describe. Father, the house is fine and the work is hard. I am well. I am learning. What you don't write, I carry 40 pounds of coal up 4 flights of stairs before the family opens their eyes, and I stand against walls for 3 hours without moving, and my hands are permanently grey, and I am 11 months into this, and I still feel like I understand nothing. What you also don't write, because you don't yet have the words for it. I think this might be making me into someone, I'm not sure who yet, but someone different from the boy who left. It's on a Thursday afternoon in the second week of June that you first see Vauxhall Gardens. Mr. Hartley, in a development that surprises no one more than you, gives you and James the Thursday evening. He does this approximately 4 times a year. It's his version of generosity, which is to say it's measured and purposeful. A worked too hard staff makes mistakes. Exhausted footmen drop things at dinner. A Wednesday evening or a Thursday afternoon is a calculated investment in accuracy. Be back by 11, Mr. Hartley says, clean and presentable. Yes, Mr. Hartley. James, a pause. Don't let him get into trouble. James, with a controlled expression that is his version of amusement. No, Mr. Hartley. Vauxhall Gardens. I've been waiting to tell you about Vauxhall Gardens. The full name in 1763 is the New Spring Gardens at Vauxhall, and they have been open in various forms since the 1660s, which means they've been running for nearly 100 years by the time you and James are crossing the river on a warm June evening. They're across the Thames, south of the city proper, in Lambeth, which means the first thing you do is take a boat. The ferry crossing costs 6pence each. The gardens themselves cost £1 admission. £1. That is, let me put this in context for you. You earn roughly £5 per year as a junior footman, which breaks down to just under 2 shillings a week. An evening at Vauxhall costs half your weekly earnings. You pay it without flinching, because James has told you what you're buying and you believe him, and because there are evenings when what you need is not to save 6pence but to remember that you're alive. The ferry is busy. The Thames at this hour on a summer evening is full of pleasure boats, watermen doing brisk trade, the air carrying the smell of the river, and something you realise as you get closer to the south bank is the smell of cooking from the gardens, roasting meats. the sweetness of something sugared on a fire. "There," James says, and you see the lights. The entrance to Vauxhall from the Watergate is through a grove of trees, and the trees have been hung with 1,000 oil lamps, not candles. Oil lamps, in coloured glass and tin, strung on wires between the branches, so that the whole grove is illuminated from within, the leaves catching the glow, the paths beneath them golden. It's the closest thing you've ever seen to a fairy story made physical. You stop walking. "Don't stop," James says, amused. "I'm not stopping. I'm just looking. I know. Walk and look." The gardens are enormous. 12 acres of formal walks, supper boxes, a bandstand, a cascade. A mechanical waterfall that operates on the hour, the crowd gathering to watch the miniature landscape with its painted boats and rushing water and a miller's wheel that actually turns. The supper boxes are arranged in a horseshoe around the central bandstand, each one a small open-fronted room with a table and benches, decorated with painted pastoral scenes. Shepherdesses, unlikely flowers, ruined temples in impossible landscapes. Each box is lit by candles in glass, and from each one you can see the central grove where the orchestra plays. The orchestra. 14 musicians playing what you'll later understand is Handel. The strings carrying the melody over the sound of 1,000 conversations. Around you. Everyone. That is not an exaggeration. Vauxhall in its prime attracts people from every level of London society. The cheap admission price, this is deliberate part of the design, means that a lady of fashion sits in her supper box 20 feet from a shopkeeper's wife, who is 20 feet from a servant on his evening off, who is 20 feet from a writer who may or may not be sober. The whole city mixed together in ways it never is anywhere else. You see it immediately. The silk coats of the fashionable crowd, the women in wide hooped skirts and towers of powdered hair. Beside them, people in decent wool, Sunday best, the clothes that say, "I have one good outfit and tonight it is deployed." Beside them, people like you, working people, servants, tradespeople, in their plain livery or their plain working clothes, their eyes wide open, taking everything in. "This is why Vauxhall exists," James says quietly, watching your face. "It's the one place in London where the pretense drops slightly, where the porter at the front doesn't look at your coat and decide whether to let you through. He buys 2 tankards of the famous Vauxhall punch from a girl carrying a tray. It's a cold thing, citrus and something sharper, the exact recipe, a trade secret that the management guards fiercely, and hands you one. 'Welcome to London,' he says, 'the real one.' You walk. This is a place designed to be walked through, to be experienced in motion, the paths winding in ways that create constant new views, new encounters, new corners where musicians play in smaller groups or acrobats perform, or a woman in extraordinary feathered headgear simply stands, very still, as if she herself is a piece of the decor, which she might be. You can't tell. The supper boxes, when you walk past them, reveal their occupants in flickering candlelight tableau. A group of young men laughing too loud over empty punch glasses. An elderly couple eating in companionable silence. 3 women of a certain type, the type that Vauxhall had a reputation for, and that the management both discouraged officially and depended on commercially, positioned at the edge of their box, watching the passing crowd with professional attention. The food here is famous for being expensive and not very much of it. The famous Vauxhall ham is shaped so thin, 6 pence for a plate of it, that when you hold a slice up to a candle, you can read newsprint through it. James says this is not an exaggeration. The joke goes around London in 1763 that a short-sighted man at Vauxhall once ate an entire tablecloth, mistaking it for ham, before he realised something was wrong. This is an exaggeration. Probably. You eat the ham anyway. It tastes, despite its insubstantiality, of itself, of salt, and something sweet in the curing, and the bread it comes with is soft and good, and the butter is real butter, not whatever they do to butter when it gets cheap. You eat it standing in the orange lamplight with the orchestra carrying Handel across the warm air, and 500 people moving through the illuminated trees around you, and you think, I am here. I am in this. This is a thing I am doing. That thought, which sounds simple, is not simple. In Chedworth, you watched the seasons turn and the days were largely similar to each other, distinguished by weather and small variations in the agricultural calendar. Nothing was like this. Nothing had this quality of being entirely particular, entirely unrepeatable. Every night at Vauxhall is the same paths, the same orchestra, the same overpriced ham, and every night at Vauxhall is completely different from every other night, because the people are different, the conversations are different, the angle of the lamplight is different at 9 o'clock from what it is at 11. You understand why people come back, why it's been running for 100 years. There's a dark walk. I should mention the dark walk. On the far side of the gardens, beyond the illuminated central area, there are paths that the management has left unlit, deliberately. The dark walk is where people go who want to not be seen. Everyone knows about the dark walk, it's mentioned in the newspapers. Occasionally things happen there that generate scandal or lawsuits or both. James steers you firmly away from the dark walk when you express curiosity. Not for footmen on their evening off, he says. Why not? Because the people who are in the dark walk at Vauxhall on a Thursday evening are either doing something very private, which is their business and not yours, or they're waiting for someone stupid enough to wander in without a weapon or a companion who can fight. You are currently that person. You do not go down the dark walk. At 9:30 you find yourselves near the Cascade. The Cascade is one of Vauxhall's great mechanical wonders. Once per hour, at the stroke of the clock, a painted curtain rises on a landscape, a miniature village, mountains, a working mill, tiny houses, through which water actually flows, the mill wheel turns, a ship sails across a miniature harbour. The crowd that gathers for this is enormous. People 3 deep, pressing forward. And in that press, this is the thing about the dark walk conversation that is about to become immediately relevant. You feel something at your coat pocket, not much, just a brush. Slight pressure. You've been in London 11 months. You've watched pickpockets work the hanging crowd at Tyburn from a distance. You've heard Mr. Hartley's instructions about carrying your afternoon half-shilling in your inside pocket and nothing in your outside ones. You spin around. A boy, maybe 15, thin-faced, coat too large, eyes already sliding sideways to somewhere else. Your hand closes on his wrist. He pulls. You hold. For a moment you're both absolutely still. He looks at you. Quick calculation. You're bigger than him. You're dressed well enough to be someone who matters. There are people all around. He opens his fingers. Your sixpence drops back into your palm. You let go of his wrist. He disappears into the crowd like smoke. The cascade begins its hourly cycle. The crowd surges forward to watch. Somewhere in the middle of it, a woman gasps in delight at the miniature waterfall, and her companion laughs. James appears at your elbow. Pickpocket, you say. I know. I saw him. You could have warned me. I could have, but you handled it yourself. He looks at the space where the boy was. Besides, what would you have done with him? Called the constable? Dragged him to the watch house? He pauses. He's 15. He'd probably hungry. You look at the space where the boy was. Same as Nell, you say. James looks at you for a moment. There's a different look than usual, more appraising. Same as a lot of people in this city, he says. Yes. You're back at Berkeley Square by 11:15. Mr. Hartley is in the hall reading by candlelight. He looks up. He doesn't say anything about the time. You're early. Good evening, he asks. Yes, Mr. Hartley. A pause. He looks back at his book. Vauxhall? Yes, Mr. Hartley. The cascade is impressive. Yes, sir. He turns a page. Good night, Thomas. The first time he's used your first name in 11 months. You go upstairs without comment. But you lie awake for a while, listening to the night. Sounds of Berkeley Square, a carriage, distant voices, the particular quality of summer midnight in London, which is different from any other midnight because the heat brings people out and keeps them out. The city refusing to cool until well past 2. And you think about what James said. Same as a lot of people in this city. This city has everything. The gold service in the vault beneath Mr. Hartley's room. The cascade at Vauxhall, engineered and painted and maintained so that 1,000 people a night can gasp at miniature falling water. The handle from a professional orchestra in an illuminated grove. And a 15-year-old boy, thin-faced and coat too large, working the crowd for sixpences. Both of those things are Vauxhall. Both of those things are London. You knew this in theory before tonight. You know it differently now. The summer deepens. The heat by mid-July is something else. Georgian London does not have the concept of ventilation in the modern sense. The houses are built to retain heat through winter, which means they retain heat through summer too, and the basement servants' quarters, where the kitchen fires burn all day every day regardless of outside temperature, reach temperatures that are, there's no kind word for it, extraordinary. The kitchen in July is a furnace. Mrs. Parry works in it without visible complaint. She has, you observe, learned the art of absolute stillness during the brief moments when she isn't actively doing something. She stands at the ranges with the particular posture of someone who has made peace with the heat by not fighting it. She moves through it like it's another ingredient she's working with. The sweat on her face by noon is something she doesn't bother wiping away anymore. It comes back immediately. What's the point? You carry water from the pump in the mews for her. Extra trips in the heat. The horses are drinking more, the kitchen needs more. And every time you walk in with a full bucket, she reaches for a cup and drinks without stopping what she's doing. How long until autumn, you ask her one afternoon in late July. She doesn't look up from the sauce she's making. About 7 weeks until it starts to matter, she says. About 12 until you mean it. Does it ever stop being hot down here? No. She tastes the sauce. Adds something from a small jar. Tastes again. You get used to it. Or you leave. Same as most things. You get used to it, or you leave. Same as most things. You've been storing up these small sentences in the way that people store kindling. Not sure what they're for yet, but keeping them. Something happens in August that I want to tell you about carefully, because it matters, and it's easy to misread. Sir Edmund's portrait is finished. Reynolds completes it on a Tuesday morning in the first week of August. You bring him his final cup of coffee, and find him standing back from the canvas with his head tilted, looking at the painting the way you look at something you've been too close to and are now seeing for the first time. Sir Edmund is not present for this. The sittings are done. Reynolds has been working from sketches for the last 2 weeks. You set down the coffee. Look at the painting. It's Sir Edmund. Obviously it's Sir Edmund. The bulk of him, the cavalry officer shoulders, the blue coat with its good brass buttons. But it's more than that. It's the thing Reynolds talked about. That something carried for 20 years. That thing at the left side of the jaw. What you see in the painting is a man who has built something and knows what it cost. That's all. That's the whole painting. A man sitting in a chair who has built something and knows what it cost. It is, you think, the most accurate portrait of a human being you have ever seen. Which is remarkable, given that there are only 3 portraits you have ever seen up close. Reynolds looks at you looking at it. Well, he says, you are a footman, you are 17, you are not being asked your opinion, you're delivering a coffee. It's him, you say, because that's the only thing you can think to say that is true and not impertinent. Reynolds picks up his coffee, drinks it. It is him, he says. Exactly him. That's the hardest thing in this work, you know. Not the craft. The craft can be learned. The hardest thing is seeing a person clearly and then putting down exactly what you see without all the things that get in the way. The flattery, the convention, the idea of what a portrait should look like. He looks at the painting. Most people, when they sit for a portrait, want to look important. He wanted to look real. A pause. That's unusual. That's why this one worked. He sets down the cup. What's your name? Whitfield, sir. Thomas Whitfield. Whitfield. He looks at you for a moment with the same attention he's been giving the canvas. It's slightly unnerving being looked at that way. How old are you? 17, sir. How long in service? 11 months, sir. He nods. Something in his expression shifts slightly, though you can't read what. You can draw, he asks. It's such an unexpected question that you almost don't answer. I used to, you say. When I was a boy, I drew the church at Chedworth about 30 times. Why 30 times? Because it looked different every time. Different light, different weather. Reynolds drinks his coffee in silence. Same church, he says finally. Different light. He doesn't say anything else. He begins cleaning his brushes, but he leaves the small sketchbook he carries in his coat, the one he makes compositional drawings in, rough and fast, 3 lines where a finished artist would use 50, leaves it on the edge of the table as he gathers his things. He leaves without taking it. He comes back 2 minutes later for the canvas, looks around the room, sees the sketchbook, looks at you. Then he picks it up and puts it back in his coat. Whether he left it deliberately, you will never know. But for the next several weeks, you spend your 1 half-day of freedom sketching. The square. The view from the attic window. Mrs. Parry at her ranges. Nell's hands at the sink. You're not good. But the church at Chedworth took 30 attempts before you were satisfied, and you have more time than that. September. The season ends. The fashionable families begin leaving London for their country estates, and Berkeley Square goes quieter. Not empty. Sir Edmund has a business that keeps him in town through October, but quieter. Fewer dinners, fewer bells, a different rhythm. You breathe differently in September. The whole household does. Mrs. Parry makes a soup one Thursday in September that you will remember for the rest of your life. This is not an exaggeration. There are soups, and there are moments. She makes it with the last of the summer vegetables from the kitchen garden at the back. Beans and onions and tomatoes that have gone past prime, too soft for the table but too good for the bin, and some ham bone and herbs and a long slow time on the range. The smell of it fills the kitchen by noon, fills the servants' hall by 1. By the time it's served at dinner, the whole basement smells of late summer and warmth and the particular comfort of something cooked slowly and carefully. You eat it and feel in a way that's hard to articulate, like someone who has earned something, not the soup, something more general. Like the right to sit in this room and eat this food and be in this place. 11 months of coal and boots and standing against walls. 11 months of bells and livery and learning what James knows and watching what Mr. Hartley does and listening to Mrs. Drummond's quiet instructions. And the soup is the sum of it somehow. This warm room, this meal, these people around the table. Mrs. Drummond, who notices more than she says. Mr. Hartley, who has been in service for 22 years and left a sketchbook on a table and used your first name exactly once. James, who taught you to carry the scuttle against your thigh. Mrs. Parry, who makes soup. Nell, who sings when she thinks no one is listening. You realise, somewhere between surprised and not surprised to find that you're not miserable here. That's not quite what you expected to discover about yourself. Now I want to tell you about winter, because winter in a Georgian house is something particular, something that requires its own space. The cold comes in mid-November, not gradually. It comes on a specific Tuesday. You remember it clearly. You wake up and the water in the basin is not just cold but has a skin of ice on it, thin as paper, that breaks when you press your finger to it. You look at the ice. You have made your peace, over 12 months, with cold water in the mornings. Cold is a fact of the early morning the way darkness is a fact of the early morning. You wash fast and get on with it. But ice means something different. It means the coal scuttles are heavier somehow, the way cold things are. It means the stone flags of the boot room have a quality of cold that goes through your boots, through your stockings, directly into your feet. It means the morning fire lighting takes longer because the flint and steel doesn't want to catch the same way, and the kindling is dry, but the air is so cold that the flame thinks twice before committing. It means the family's demands for warmth increase, while your ability to produce warmth stays exactly the same. More coal, more trips up the stairs, earlier starts. You start the fires at 5 now instead of past. Sir Edmund, increasingly, comes downstairs before 7, and the library must be warm when he arrives. James shows you a technique for banking the coal, so that a fire lit at 5 will still be generating heat at 9 without being revived. You practice it. You get better. Your hands in November are a different thing from your hands in June. June, coal grey, but essentially functional. November, grey and cracked and stiff in the mornings, the knuckles splitting at the driest points. Not bleeding, not badly, but tight and rough, a texture you can feel when you touch anything. Mrs. Parry gives you a small pot of rendered goose fat without comment. You rub it into your hands at night. It helps. Mrs. Drummond observes this transaction without comment, but the next week there's a second, larger pot on the shelf in the boot room with a piece of paper that says hands in Mrs. Drummond's handwriting. No one claims it. Everyone uses it. The frost. I need to tell you about the frost. It doesn't come every winter. In fact, in the time that follows, in the years and decades after 1763, there will be fewer and fewer winters cold enough for what I'm about to describe. But in January 1764, the Thames freezes. This has happened before. It will happen again, though after 1814 the combination of a new London bridge with wider arches and warmer winters will make it increasingly rare. But now, in January of your first full winter in London, the river freezes. It starts at the edges. The mud flats on the south bank begin to ice over on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday the shallower stretches upriver are solid. By Thursday, the watermen are reporting that the middle of the river, the main channel where the current runs strongest, is congealing. By Saturday, it is crossed on foot. You know this because Nell, whose duties sometimes bring her to the area gate to take in deliveries, comes inside at 8:30 on Saturday morning with her eyes wide and red from cold, saying, "They're walking on the river. You've seen frost fairs in the almanac pictures. The bookseller on Bond Street has an engraving in his window of the frost fair of 1740, the last big one before this, showing a city built on ice, stalls and bonfires, and an ox roasting on the river itself. You assumed, when you saw it, that it was an exaggeration. It isn't. Mr. Hartley gives you Sunday afternoon. You and James, and to everyone's surprise, Nell. Mrs. Drummond makes a decision that is both practical and kind, wrapped in the same sentence. The child needs air, and you two can keep an eye on her. The three of you walk down to the river. The scene that greets you on the embankment is one of those things that burns itself onto the inside of your eyes. The Thames, which you've crossed 100 times in boats and looked at 1,000 times from bridges and river banks, is not the Thames. It is a road. A white, wide, improbably solid road, covered with people and stalls and the orange dots of bonfires every 100 yards. The watermen who earn their living from the river have reinvented themselves. They're charging people to walk onto the ice, a penny per person, through a formal gate that exists because the watermen own the right to the river and intend to be compensated for it even when the river is temporarily solid. You pay your pennies, and then you step onto the ice. The sound is different from anything you expected. Not silence, a kind of resonance, a low vibration underfoot, the sound of thickness. 20 inches of ice, someone tells you. Maybe more in the middle. The frost fair stretches as far as you can see in both directions. Stalls selling gin and hot spiced wine and roast chestnuts. The smell of the chestnuts carrying across the cold air in a way that makes your chest ache slightly, with some feeling you don't have a name for. A printer has set up a press on the ice. He's printing commemorative cards. Printed on the River Thames, Frost Fair 1764. People are lined up to buy them. The cards will be souvenirs, proof that this impossible thing happened. A Skittles alley. Men and boys bowling on the ice. The wooden pins skittering sideways when they fall. Barbers. Bull baiting has been advertised, though you don't see it. And there, in the middle distance, surrounded by a crowd, an ox turning on a spit above a fire that burns on the ice itself. The fat dripping down into the flames with a hiss and spit of smoke. The smell of roasting beef drifting across the fair. They are roasting an ox. On the River Thames, on the ice. Even by the standards of the city that you've spent a year learning, this is extraordinary. Nell runs ahead of you. She's 13, and this is a miracle, and she has, for the first time in the months you've known her, forgotten to look suspicious. She slides, falls, gets up, slides again, laughing in a way you haven't heard her laugh. A proper laugh, all the way through. "Come on," you say to James, "I'm too old for sliding." "You're 22? "Precisely, too old." He watches Nell spin in a circle with her arms out, laughing at the sky. "Go ahead, I'll watch from here." You slide. You fall immediately. The ice is not smooth the way ice on a pond is smooth. It's been walked over and compacted and roughened, and it gives you almost no purchase at all. Your feet Go one way and your body goes another, and you hit the ice with a thud that shocks through your whole spine. You lie there for a moment. Above you, the grey January sky. Around you, the sounds of the frost fair, the barkers and the music and the crackling of the bonfires, and somewhere nearby, Nell still laughing. You are lying on the River Thames. You are lying on the Thames, and through the ice, faint but real, you can feel it in your back, through the 20 inches of frozen river. The water is still moving. Deep down under all that weight of cold, the river is still running, still going somewhere, still the Thames underneath, doing what the Thames does, regardless of what's happening on the surface. It's that recent, that real. You get up. You buy 3 printed cards from the press on the ice. One for yourself, one for your mother, who will receive it 2 weeks later in Chedworth and show it to everyone in the village. One for Reverend Mr. Ashby, who will put it in a frame and look at it until he dies. Printed on the River Thames Frost Fair, January 1764, January, February. The ice lasts 3 weeks before it breaks up in a February thaw. The watermen watching the cracks with professional interest, the Frost Fair dismantled in a single frantic day as the middle of the river softens and the outer edges begin to shift. There are always people who wait too long, who come back the day after the main fair ends when the ice is already softening, convinced it will hold one more day. It doesn't always hold one more day. Nobody dies this time, but 2 stalls go through near Blackfriars, their owners scrambling to the bank while their goods, roasted chestnuts, a barrel of gin, a stack of commemorative prints, sink into the dark water. The river reasserts itself. By the end of February you'd barely know it froze at all. March, 12 months, a full year. You mark it privately, because there's no ceremony for it, and no one else is counting. One morning, in the first week of March, you stand in the boot room with 12 pairs of boots in front of you, and you begin. Your hands move without consulting you. The lamp black, the lard, the circular pressure. The technique you've watched James do and done yourself 400 times and then 500, and now somewhere past 1,000. You work the first boot, then the second, then the third. At the third boot you realise you've stopped tracking what you're doing. Your hands know it. They have absorbed it all the way down past the level where you have to think about it. The correct pressure, the correct circles, the correct angle for the final polish cloth. You hold the third boot up to the light. The shine is, you think, exactly right. You set it in the rack, pick up the 4th boot, move on. There is an evening in late March that I want to describe carefully, because it's the kind of evening that doesn't look like much from the outside and means everything from the inside. Sir Edmund has been in his study all day. The bell has rung twice, once for more coal, once for a second pot of coffee, and each time you've brought what was needed and left. At 7 o'clock, Mr. Hartley tells you that Sir Edmund will take supper in the study tonight, informally, and asks you to bring a tray. The tray, cold beef, bread, a small bunch of grapes, the last of the good Madeira. You carry it up the main stairs, not the back stairs, the main stairs, which you use only when carrying something for the family's rooms, and knock at the study door. Come. Sir Edmund is at his desk. He's in his dressing gown, which means the evening has already happened for him. The social obligations of the day discharged. He looks tired in a way that he doesn't look in the mornings or at dinner. The tiredness of a man who's been working at something difficult. You set the tray on the side table beside the window. There's a letter there, Sir Edmund says, without looking up from his papers. He gestures at the desk. For Bickerton's on Bond Street, To be delivered tomorrow morning, early. Yes, sir. And Whitfield. You pause. The portrait is being collected Thursday. I want the hall prepared as if for guests. Flowers, if Mrs. Drummond can arrange it. Reynolds is bringing a colleague. Yes, sir. I'll let Mrs. Drummond know. A pause. Sir Edmund looks up at you then. Direct. The way he looked at Reynolds over dinner when he asked the right question. The same quality of real attention. You've been here a year, he says. Just over, sir. Hartley tells me you're doing well. You say nothing. There is no correct response to this that isn't either sycophantic or impertinent. He doesn't say that about everyone, Sir Edmund says. In 20 years I can count the times he's volunteered that kind of information on 2 hands. He looks at you for another moment. There's a position coming open in my brother-in-law's household next autumn. He's looking for a first footman. Capable man. Mayfair House, good conditions, good wages. He returns to his papers. I'm not offering it to you. I'm telling you it exists. What you do with that information is your own affair. He picks up his pen. That will be all. You go down the main stairs slowly. Not because anything is wrong. Nothing is wrong. You just need the length of the stairs to hold the thing he said and turn it over. A position in a good house. First footman, not junior. Wages that would be half again what you earn now. Sir Edmund just told you that you're worth that position. That Hartley said so. Hartley, who's been in service 22 years, who says this about people on 2 hands. You reach the bottom of the stairs. James is in the hall polishing the table with a soft cloth. He looks at you. Something in your expression. All right? He asks. Fine, you say. Yes. He goes back to polishing. James. He doesn't look up. Yes. When you were... How long have you been in service? 7 years. Do you ever think about... You stop. Never mind. He puts the cloth down, looks at you properly. Think about what? Doing something else. Something other than this. He's quiet for a moment. The hall clock ticks. Outside, Berkeley Square is doing its evening thing. Carriages, voices, the sound of late March wind in the plane trees. Every man who's ever stood where you're standing has thought about it, James says. That's not a question unique to you. And, he picks up the cloth again, begins polishing. And this is what I'm good at, he says. Not what I thought I'd be good at when I was 15 and came to my first house, but what I turned out to be good at. He smooths the cloth over the table surface. There are worse things, he says, than being good at something. April comes in cold and then warm, and then cold again, the way April in London always does, as if the season is making up its mind and keeps changing it. The household settles into spring. The fires are needed less. The mornings are lighter. The coal scuttles are lighter too. Not literally, but the weight of carrying them in the dark is different from carrying them in the grey pre-dawn light. And the grey pre-dawn light is different from carrying them in the pale 6 o'clock morning that April begins to offer. Small things. But small things are what a year is made of. You have been in this house for 13 months. You know things now that you couldn't have imagined knowing 13 months ago. You know that Sir Edmund sleeps badly on Tuesdays and comes downstairs early, and that the reason is the meeting he attends on Wednesdays with his business partners, which generates in him a kind of anticipatory restlessness he doesn't know how to manage except by moving. You know that Lady Cavendish Moore's migraines are worse in April and October, and that on the mornings when Agnes looks slightly more contained than usual, it means the migraine has been bad. You know that. Mrs. Parry's left knee gives her trouble in the damp, and that she adjusts her weight distribution when it does, standing more to the right, and that she never mentions it to anyone. You know that the third step from the top on the back stairs creaks, unless you step to the far left of it, and that the second floor corridor has a draught from the window at the end that makes the candles gutter if you walk past them too fast. You know the smell of the house at 5 in the morning, which is different from its smell at noon, which is different from its smell at midnight when you've come in late and the fires are banked and everything is cool and still. You know the house the way you know a person you live with. All its habits and preferences and the particular ways it behaves when the weather changes. You have, without fully noticing when it happened, become part of it. The crisis, when it comes, arrives the way most real crises do, dressed as an ordinary Tuesday. The occasion is a dinner, not unusual. 12 guests, a notable occasion. Sir Edmund's business partner recently returned from a second trip to India. 3 members of Parliament, a naval admiral, Lady Cavendish More's sister and her husband, and several merchants whose connection to the firm I won't detail because it would take longer than the dinner itself. 12 covers, the gold service, full formal dress. The preparation begins at noon and runs without incident until 5:30, which is when the wine goes wrong. I need to explain something about Georgian wine service, because without this context the crisis won't make sense. Wine in 1763 is not what wine is now. It's not stored in climate-controlled conditions or sealed with modern corks or transported in temperature-managed containers. It comes in barrels from France or Portugal or the Rhineland. It's bottled here, and then it sits in the cellar until it's needed. The cellar in this house is Mr. Hartley's domain. He knows every bottle in it. He manages the rotation, the temperatures, the decanting schedule. His cellar book is a precise record going back 8 years. He had, for tonight's dinner, selected a claret, a 1756, a good year, to be decanted at 4 o'clock, allowing 2 hours to breathe before the dinner. At 5:30, Mr. Hartley opens the decanter he has prepared, holds it to the light, and his expression does something it almost never does. It goes very still in a way that is not the same as his normal controlled stillness. He calls James. James looks at the decanter. James says nothing, which itself says everything. Then Mr. Hartley calls you. He holds the decanter to the candle. The wine inside is the colour of vinegar. Not quite right. The clarity is wrong, a slight murkiness. And when Mr. Hartley tilts it gently, you can see a sediment that shouldn't be there, moving in a way that good wine doesn't move. He passes the decanter to you without a word. You smell it. It smells of the thing that happens to wine when it goes wrong, that sour, flat, slightly medicinal smell that is the opposite of what good wine smells like. The whole case? James asks. I don't know yet, Mr. Hartley says. His voice is entirely level. Go to the cellar. Check each bottle of the 1756. The 1756 has gone, not all of it, but enough. 5 of the 12 bottles in the case have the same look to them when James brings them up one by one. The other 7 are intact. 7 good bottles is not 12 covers. Not for a formal dinner of 12 where the claret is expected to flow for 3 hours. Mr. Hartley stands in the butler's pantry with the 7 bottles and the wreckage of the 5 bad ones, and he is completely silent for precisely 4 seconds. In 4 seconds he makes a decision. A sequence of decisions, actually, fast as cards being dealt. He turns to you. The 1758 Burgundy, he says. 3 bottles, bring them up. Yes, sir. And the Madeira 4 bottles. and the 61. Hock. You move. James moves. The cellar is navigated in near darkness. The bottles found by the light of a single taper, carried up with the particular care of someone who knows that what he's carrying is the difference between success and catastrophe. But even with 3 Burgundies and 4 Madeiras and the Hock, there's a gap. Mr. Hartley is doing the calculation. The gap is real. He looks at James. James looks at the bottles. The vintner, James says. Mr. Hartley nods once. He turns to you. Listen carefully, he says. You're going to Mr. Kellaway's on Piccadilly. You know where that is. Yes, sir. You're going to tell him, not ask, tell, that we need 6 bottles of his best available claret, decanted and delivered to Berkeley Square within 40 minutes. Tell him it's for Sir Edmund's table. Tell him I'll settle the account before the end of the week. 6 bottles, 40 minutes, from Kellaway's on Piccadilly. You won't make it in 40 minutes walk-in. No, sir. He reaches into his coat and produces a coin. Take the hackney at the stand on the square and Thomas. Sir, don't run. Don't look like anything is wrong. Get there, get the wine, come back, calmly. This is the instruction he gives you. Not some other footman, not James. You. Yes, Mr. Hartley. The hackney carriage smells of previous passengers and horse. The driver does not share your urgency, which is why you told him there was an extra penny in it if he made Piccadilly in 7 minutes. He makes it in 6. Kellaway's, wine merchant since 1729. A narrow shop front between a hatter and a bookbinder, with bottles arranged in the window, and a smell, when you open the door, of wood and cork, and the earthiness of 1,000 different wines. The man behind the counter, not Kellaway, who is old and retired, but his son, who is perhaps 35 with ink on his fingers from the ledger he was writing in, looks up. You state your case. 6 bottles, best available claret, decanted. 40 minutes. You've already used 8 of them. Number 14. Berkeley Square, Sir Edmund Cavendish More's household. Mr. Hartley sends his regards. The son listens. He doesn't argue. He doesn't ask questions. He knows the name Hartley the way any wine merchant knows the butlers of the great Mayfair houses. These men are his best customers, his reliable accounts, the people who keep his ledger healthy through the lean months. I have a 59 that would serve, Gieserson, he says. Decanted it 2 hours ago for another customer who cancelled. It's open and breathing. Is it good? He looks at you. It's exceptional, he says. 6 bottles of the 59, wrapped in their cloths, placed in a wooden case with handles. You count out the money. Mr. Hartley gave you enough, precisely with the extra penny for the carriage included in the calculation, because Mr. Hartley does not make arithmetic errors. And lift the case. The extra penny, the son says as you turn to leave, your driver. He hands you a coin. Tell Hartley the 59 will be better than what he planned, he says. Not because I'm selling it, because it's true. Back in the hackney, back across Mayfair, the case on your lap, its weight real and reassuring. You make Berkeley Square in 9 minutes. The clock says 6:30. Guests arrive at 7. Mr. Hartley takes the case from you at the front door. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. He carries the case to his pantry and begins the final preparations. James materializes at your shoulder. Clean up, he says. You've got 20 minutes. You look down at yourself. You don't look bad. The errand was accomplished with the calm that was requested. You didn't run. You didn't sweat through your livery. You look like a footman who went to Piccadilly and came back. Stockings, you ask? Check the left one. You look down. The left one is fine. Good, James says. He says it the same way he said it about the table setting, quietly, meaning it. The dinner is extraordinary, not despite the wine crisis, perhaps partly because of it. The 59 claret that the vintner's son said was exceptional is, in fact, exceptional. Mr. Hartley serves it with a confidence that communicates to the guests something like, "This was always the plan. There is no other plan. There's never been another plan. That is the craft of it. Not just the food or the wine or the gleaming gold service on the white linen. The craft of it is the seamlessness. The way 12 people sit at a table for 4 hours and consume the effort of 20 without ever being aware of the effort. You serve the third course and watch Sir Edmund's face when he takes the first sip of the claret. The slight pause, the recalibration. He knows this isn't what he specified. He knows something has changed. He looks down the table at Mr. Hartley, who is stationed near the sideboard. Mr. Hartley returns the look. A half-second of communication between two men who have worked together for 11 years. Sir Edmund takes a second sip. He turns back to his conversation with the Admiral. The evening proceeds. You stand against the wall for 3 hours and 40 minutes while 12 people eat and drink and talk about things you only partly understand. The politics of the East India Company, the question of what's to be done about the American colonies and their increasing complaints about taxation, the Admiral's account of a naval engagement off the Azores that cost him 2 ships and made him a national hero, the question of whether Richardson's new novel is moral or merely pretends to be. You refill glasses, you carry plates, you lift covers and set them down and retreat and advance and retreat again, moving through the space between the bodies with the particular care of someone who has learned that invisibility is not absence but precision. You are everywhere in the room, and nowhere in it. At one point, pouring wine into the glass of the MP on the left side of the table, you catch a fragment of conversation between the Admiral and one of the merchants. The thing about those years in the Atlantic is that you come back and everything looks different. Not better or worse, just different. How so? You've seen what the world is from the middle of it, from the water, and then you come back to all this. A gesture at the room, the table, the golden candlelight. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just very small. You pour the wine, you move on, but you carry that fragment with you for the rest of the evening, and you're still carrying it later that night. After the guests go, there is the clearing. This is the part that doesn't appear in any painting or any engraving of Georgian domestic life. The part after the event. The table stripped of its cloth and its glittering service. Each piece of the gold plate wrapped in its chamois and returned to the vault. The crystal washed, dried, checked for chips, stored. The candles extinguished. The wax drips pried from the holders cleaned. The bottles collected. 12 empty, 2 mostly empty, 1 barely touched. One guest who barely drank, you noted. A young MP who spent the evening listening more than talking. A habit that will probably serve him well. The dining room left spotless. Ready for tomorrow. Ready for the next occasion. Or the ordinary Tuesday that follows a formal Monday. You and James do this mostly in silence. It is, this clearing, a kind of ceremony in reverse. You're disassembling a thing that took all day to build, but disassembling it carefully, returning each piece to its right place. By the time you're done, it's quarter to midnight. The house is quiet. The family has retired. Mr. Hartley has said what he needed to say. Well done, both of you, and gone to his room. Mrs. Parry has been asleep for an hour. She starts at 5 regardless of what happened the night before. You and James stand in the darkened dining room. For a moment, the empty table, the curtained windows, the last guttering candle on the sideboard. "You were quick tonight," James says. "At Kellaway's." 32 minutes, you say. "I know, I counted." A pause. "The wine was better than what he planned," you say. "The vintner said so." James looks at the empty table. "It often is," he says, "when something goes wrong and you have to improvise. The improvisation sometimes turns out better than the plan." He picks up the last candle from the sideboard. "Come on," he says. "Morning comes at 5. And here is where I slow down. Here is where the story stops moving forward and just stays for a moment in the place where you are. Because there are nights like this one at the end of a day that was hard and then harder and then unexpectedly good, when you need to sit inside it for a while before you let it go. The attic room. The window is a small square of darkness. The sky behind it, the particular dark grey of London at midnight. Never quite black because there's always some light. Tavern windows, the occasional link boy's torch, moonlight on cloud, the straw mattress, the thin blanket, the same room you've slept in for 13 months. You lie down without undressing, the way you do when you're too tired to manage the buttons. Outside, London does what London does. A carriage on the square below, late. Its wheels on the cobbles, a sound you know so well now that it barely registers. Voices somewhere, rising and then falling. A dog, briefly, and then silence. The 3 o'clock watchman calling the hour, his voice carrying up through the spring night air. Somewhere on this same street, 100 other houses like this one, 100 other attic rooms, 100 other people who spent today carrying coal and polishing silver and standing against walls while other people ate dinner. And in those rooms, the same thoughts, probably. The same tired body settling into the same rough mattress. The same sounds of the city coming in through the same small window. You think about what the Admiral said. You've seen what the world is from the middle of it. And then you come back and it's very small. You are 17 and you have seen what exactly? You have seen Berkeley Square in all its seasons. You've seen the Thames freeze solid and carry a fare on its back. You've seen a painting that made you understand what a face could hold. You've seen a pickpocket worker crowd and a boy shrug and let him go. You have seen Vauxhall Gardens lit with 1,000 lamps. You have seen a girl with red hands singing when she thought no one was listening. You have not seen the Atlantic. You have not seen India. You have not seen the things that make a man come back and find his whole world small. But you have seen this. You have seen the way the gold service catches candlelight. The way a decanter of good wine held to the light tells you everything you need to know. The way 12 people eat a meal that took 20 people all day to prepare, and the preparation is what makes the meal possible, and the meal will never know the preparation. You have seen what it takes to run a beautiful thing, and there is, do you think, a kind of knowledge in that? A kind of knowledge that the people at the dinner table don't have, that the Admiral doesn't have for all his oceans. You know what this looks like from the other side. Your hands. You hold them up in the grey dark and look at them. The coal grey that won't quite wash out. The cracks at the knuckles, fainter now with the goose fat but present. The calluses that have built up on your right palm from the boot brush. These hands have carried 40 pounds of coal up 4 flights of stairs more times than you can count. They have polished enough silver to fill a room. They have laid enough tables to cover a field. They are not the hands you came with. They are not the hands of the boy from Chedworth with the 2 large breeches, and the Reverend's letter of recommendation. They are something you have made, something the work has made in you through you. Your mother's hands look like this, the same cracks, the same roughness, just from different work. Bread and washing and garden and the 100 daily tasks of a household that runs without servants, that is its own servants. You never thought about your mother's hands before. You think about them now. She's been doing what you do, what everyone does. The invisible work of keeping a life running, the fires and the food and the clean floors. Nobody writes about it, nobody paints it, but it gets done. Every day, everywhere, by hands like yours. That is its own kind of empire. The thing Mr. Hartley did not say and will not say is, "I trust you." He said it in the way that people who don't say things. He handed you a coin and a destination and an impossible deadline and sent you into the city to solve a problem that, if it hadn't been solved, would have been visible to 12 people who matter. He didn't send James, he sent you. And you went and you solved it, and you came back in 32 minutes with 6 bottles of a wine that turned out to be better than the plan. That happened. That is a real thing that happened on a real Tuesday at number 14 Berkeley Square in the spring of 1764 in London. In the reign of George III, you did that. The first full year is behind you now. What does it look like from here? It looks like coal dust and boot polish and lamp black, and the mineral smell of silver being polished, and the rich warm smell of Mrs. Parry's soup on a September afternoon. It looks like James's controlled neutral face, and Mr. Hartley's first name once, and the frost fair, and the cascade at Vauxhall and Reynolds talking about light, while a portrait came into being in the library. It looks like Nell singing at the sink. It looks like a boy of 15 with a coat too large, disappearing into the crowd at Vauxhall. It looks like 6 bottles of 1759 claret carried across Mayfair in 32 minutes. It looks like an attic room in a grey London sky, and the sound of the 3 o'clock watchman, and the particular quality of being tired in a way that is earned, and therefore not entirely unpleasant. The candle you brought up has burned to a stub on the floor beside the mattress. It's on its last 1/4 inch of tallow, the flame gone small and wavering. You watch it. This is a thing you do sometimes, in the space between being awake and being asleep. Watch the last of a candle. There's something almost hypnotic about it. The flame is so small, it barely lights the room at all. Just a pale circle of gold on the floorboards, and the suggestion of your own hands at the edge of it resting on the blanket. The flame moves in a draught you can't feel. Left, right, steady. Left, right, steady. The shadows on the ceiling shift with it, slow and soft. Tomorrow there will be boots. There will always be boots. Tomorrow at 5 the bells are already pulling you toward them, toward the cold stone floor and the lamp black and the 30 pounds of coal and the back stairs. Tomorrow Sir Edmund will come downstairs at 9 and not look at you, and you will pour his coffee, and he will not say thank you. And that will be correct. That will be the shape of the day. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, you are lying in a house you know better than you know yourself, in a city that has made you into someone you wouldn't have believed a year ago, in a country that is, at this precise moment in history, in the middle of becoming something the world has never quite seen before. An empire of trade and ships and men who sit at mahogany tables and drink claret and argue about whether the Americans have a point. And in the basement of every house on every fine street in this city, people are sleeping now. People with cracked hands and tired backs and the particular sleep of someone who has earned it the hard way. You're one of them. The flame goes very small, the smallest it's been. You watch it. There's a story you told yourself once back in Chedworth about what London would be. The city was a thing in your imagination, bright and enormous and full of possibility, and somewhere to become someone other than a boy in a village who drew the church 30 times because there was nothing else to draw. That story is gone now, replaced by the real thing. The real thing is harder and colder and more complicated than the story. The real thing smells like coal dust and old linen and Mrs. Parry's kitchen. The real thing has rules that took a year to learn and will take another 5 years to understand properly. But the real thing is real, and you are in it. And that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. The flame dies. Not dramatically. There's no last flare, no final brightness. It just goes very small and then smaller and then it's gone and the room is dark, the real dark, the dark that's been waiting all evening behind the candle. Your eyes adjust. The window square. The grey dark sky. The suggestion of London going about its midnight business on the other side of the glass. You close your eyes. Let the sounds come. The ones you know so well now that they're part of you. The carriage on the square below. The voices in the distance. The watchman with his hour. Let them come. Let them be background now instead of foreground. Let them do what the sounds of a familiar place do when you've heard them long enough. Recede into the texture of the night. Become the sound of home rather than the sound of a city. Let your hands rest. They've earned it. Every crack in every knuckle, every grey seam in every line, everything the lampblack got into and the goose fat tried to fix. Let them rest. The straw mattress beneath you. You remember the first night on it, the scratch of the straw through the ticking, the unfamiliar hardness, the strange sounds of the house, settling, the feeling of being in the wrong place in the right place, which is how all beginnings feel. Now it feels like nothing. It feels like sleep. It feels like where you're supposed to be. That's what a year does. That's what a year always does. Warm enough. You are warm enough. Your body, which has carried and climbed and knelt and stood and moved through every room in this house more times than you can count, your body is done now. It's claimed by the mattress and the blanket and the simple animal fact of horizontal. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have work tomorrow that matters. People around you who are, in their various ways, looking after you the same way you look after the house. The goose fat on the shelf, the first name once, the 32 minutes trusted to you. You have a trade you're learning, a craft that lives in your hands now, in the muscles of your arms, in the automatic knowledge of pressure and angle and weight. You have a city, and that is more than a boy from Chedworth with a letter of recommendation had any right to expect. That is enough. Let sleep come now. Let it come the way it comes at the end of a day like this, when the body has nothing left to argue with it. Let the sounds of Berkeley Square get quieter. Not because they stop. They don't. They never entirely stop. But because you are moving away from them now, down through the levels of the night, past the place where you can still name the sounds and into the place where they're just texture, just the breathing of the city, just London doing what London does. Centuries will pass. The house you're sleeping in will change. The black painted door with the brass knocker will survive 3 centuries, replaced and repainted and replaced again. But the door, the idea of the door, that will remain. The plane trees in the square below will grow into the famous cathedral of branches they're destined to become. 18th century, 19th century, 20th, 21st. The same trees, larger, older, the roots going deeper into the square than anyone who planted them could have imagined. The bells will change. The horses will disappear from the streets. The coal will give way to gas, will give way to electricity, will give way to things that haven't been invented yet. But someone will still be awake in this city before the family opens their eyes. Someone will still be doing the work that makes the visible world possible. The invisible labour, the 32-minute dash across the city, the goose fat on the shelf, the care. That's what it comes down to. The care that people take of the things and the people entrusted to them. That doesn't change. That has never changed. And somewhere in the long history of this city, this beautiful, complicated, brutal, extraordinary city, you are part of it. Thomas Whitfield from Chedworth, 17 years old, 13 months a footman in Mayfair, your hands grey with lamp black and your left stocking finally right. You are part of it. The same as the Admiral, the same as Reynolds with his brush, the same as Nell with her red hands and her Kent song. All of it together. All of it the same city. All of it real. The watchman calls an hour you're too far gone to count. It reaches you from very far away. 3 strokes, maybe. Or 4. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters now except the dark and the quiet and the slow, complete surrender of the body that has done everything today that was asked of it and more. You've been here a year. You came with nothing but a letter and a pair of 2 large breeches and a determination to become someone. You're becoming someone. It's happening right now, even in your sleep. Especially in your sleep. Every morning makes you someone slightly different. Every boot, every bell, every 32 minutes across Mayfair with a case of wine and a coin and a deadline. Every conversation you've stored up like kindling. Every face. You've learned to read. Every song you've pretended not to hear. It's all adding up to something. You don't know yet what, but it's adding up. Let it come. The darkness, the quiet, the long, slow descent. Let the city go about its business without you for a few hours. It can manage. It has been managing since long before you arrived, and it will manage long after. But right now, in this particular room, on this particular night, in the spring of 1764, in the greatest city in the world, you rest. You have earned this rest. You take it. And whatever dreams come, let them come. Good night.